Returns Home by Children and Changes in Parents' Well-Being in Europe by Marco Tosi and Emily Grundy. So basically in this article they start talking about how there's been an increase in co-residency and boomerang kids like with either staying in or returning to the parental home, and how this has been an increasing subject in recent years. They then go on to say how co-residency amongst the parent and the child can either be previous research has found that co-residency can either be a source of emotional and integrational support for the parent, but it can also be a source of conflict and stress for the parent. So then he goes on to the literature review, and he's talking about how in previous research he says that although there's been how he has previously mentioned an increase in the amount of co-resident children residing in the parental home, that there is still a very big lack of research and literature, and that the literature that is available is very limited. He says that some of the research available has focused on the determinants of co-residency and of leaving and returning to the parental home, and he says that there's also growing literature on possible implications of intergenerational co-residence for the well-being of both the younger and older generation. So basically how there's research on the determinants and on the possible implications of the co-residency and of the returning home. But he says that most of the previous research available has been cross-sectional and focuses only on the effects of intergenerational co-residency on older parents, depressive symptoms, or physical health status. He says that some of the research available has found positive impacts on the co-residency with adult children on parents' well-being, but whereas other research has also found that older parents living with children have shown worse physical health and worse quality of life when there is a co-residing adult child present in the home. He then says that the reason that the research has so contradicting, how some shows positive and some shows negative effects, can be explained because these findings suggest that the implications of intergenerational co-residence for parental well-being may vary considerably depending on whether co-residence is a response to parental or to children's needs, or whether it reflects continuation of an existing living arrangement or a change for one or other generation, as well as by cultural and institutional context. So he says that the reason that there's such a difference in the findings of the previous research is because of all those factors that I've just listed. He then continues by saying that previous research out there has found that parental life satisfaction increases as adult children leave the family nest and achieve the adult status of living on your own and finally becoming an adult. Basically, he then goes on to say how the research available has related returning home to a decline in parental quality of life to a greater extent or only when all other children have left the home. He says that economic difficulties, temporary instability, union dissolution, emotional distress, and mental health problems in previous research have all been found to prompt a return to the parental home. Basically, he does continue more on with the literature review, but basically the whole gist of it is basically that the research available has been shown both positive and negative attributes and results of having a co-residency amongst the parent and the child, and that in this research they investigate whether the co-residency has negative associations between the boomerang movement and the parents' quality of life. They also investigate whether these negative associations or hypothetical negative associations change or are differentiated between different regions of Europe. And they analyze whether any factors such as divorce or unemployment have a greater or lesser effect on the quality of life of the parent during the co-residency. So basically, before I go on into the data and methods, I just want to say that I'm including this into my research, even though it's talking about how co-residency and returning to the home affects the parents' quality of life. And that's not really the focus I'm going into. It is one of the one of the specific doors in my triangle. So I thought, and when I found this article, the results are very useful for my personal research, and so even though it's not one of the topics that I'm focusing on or choosing, it is still part of my triangle, and that is why I decided to include it. On to the data methods. In this study, they used data from 4 waves of the Survey of Health, Aging and Retirement in Europe, which is the SHARE study. And basically in this study, it is a cross-national population representative longitudinal survey. So basically in this survey, it was on information about individuals aged 50 years and older, and basically they were just the respondents in the survey were interviewed in multiple waves, but the sample was also refreshed to keep it representative of the aging population of each wave. And basically this study found analyzed detailed information for up to 5 children living inside and outside of the household, and the sample included people aged 50 through 75 who had at least one child living outside of the parental home at baseline and ended up with a child living in the home throughout the course of the study. And yeah, that's basically how they were able to find the results, and that's how their methods of finding the results in this study. And now on to the actual results of the study. So in this paper, they extended the literature of the subject by analyzing the specific pathway of co-residency more narrowly by boomerang moves, and the association of boomerang moves with changes in parents' quality of life. Found in this study that parents experience a lower quality of life and experience a decline in quality of life when one of their children returned to live with them, although, as discussed below, there were variations across the different regions that they tested. They also found that returning home was correlated with a decline in parents' quality of life when there was no other children residing in that specific home. So basically when let's say for example, if it was a family of 4 and there was no children in the house and then one of the children came back, that they found that led to a higher decrease in quality of life for the parents, and they explain this by the fact of the whole empty nest phase, because like we said before, the empty nest has been found to be a time and period for the parents of a good period for the parents of independence and privacy and intimacy between the 2 parents, and then the filling of that empty nest was regarded as a violation of this life course stage, and is what caused the more negative impact in the quality of life when there was only one child that came back. If it wasn't already another child there, it wasn't such bad of a decrease in quality of life. They also found that the parents' quality of life decreased more when the child became unemployed, and increased when a child started living with a partner. And these findings are consistent with the concept of linked lives and with previous research that they mentioned in the literature review. So in this research, unlike previous research, they found no support for whether movers' characteristics moderated the association between returning home on parental well-being. So that's basically it for the results. Again, just to restate it, the main biggest finding of this study was that the returns to the parental home by adult children were associated with decreases in parental quality of life, and that it did show. So basically, it did show that when the child returned home, a decrease in parental quality of life, and that this happened most often and was most largely reflected when it was associated with the return of a child to an empty nest where no other children were still living in that home. And that's basically the biggest finding of this research.